your hearts up to the Lord.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. Spread the news that He is joy. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Sing to the mountains, sing to the meadows, sing hallelujah, God is joy.
Lift your hearts up to the Lord.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. Spread the news that He is true. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Sing to the mountains, sing to the meadows, sing hallelujah, God is true. Lift your hearts up to the Lord. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Spread the news that He is love. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Sing to the mountains, sing to the meadows, sing hallelujah, God is love. Sing to the mountains, sing to the meadows, sing hallelujah, God is love.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Hridaya. This is my friend Nitai. It's our joy to be here this morning sharing Sunday service with you. We'll start with a reading from Rays of the One Light. These are weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. Too high? They're by Swami Kriyananda, based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. This week's reading is entitled The Eternal Now. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. When will I find God? Many devotees have asked this question. Because worldly goals require time, usually, for their fulfillment, we imagine time to be a factor on the spiritual path. And so it is, but only because we think it is. God is as much with us now as He will ever be. It is not He who needs to come to us. We need to come to Him. And that process of coming is a matter of transforming our self-perception. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 4, Jesus Christ says, Say not ye, there are yet 4 months, and then cometh harvest? Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they are white already to harvest. There is a practical teaching in these words, apart from the statement that we have God already, and have only to realize that truth. Jesus is saying, lift up your eyes and look. To hold the eyes uplifted is the best position for meditation. For the seat of superconsciousness lies at the point midway between the eyebrows, in the frontal lobe of the brain just behind that point. This point is known also as the Christ center. By lifting up your eyes and concentrating there, you will find it easier to enter the state of ecstasy. That is why saints in every religion have often been observed during states of deep inner communion, with their eyes uplifted, focused on the inner light, white, as Jesus said, all ready to harvest. The Bhagavad Gita goes further into this meditative teaching. In the 6th chapter it states, holding the spine firm, the neck and head erect and motionless, let the yogi focus his eyes at the starting place of the nose, the point between the eyebrows. Let not his gaze roam elsewhere. In meditation, tell yourself, I have him already. I am alive forever in the divine light. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
First of all, I guess, happy Father's Day to those of people in the audience who qualify for that. One of the things that we're going to talk about this morning is the change of ages that we're going through, and it's definitely reflected in fatherhood, as in many other ways. But I can remember from my own childhood, which was back in the 40s and the 50s, and at that time, at least in this society, the father's role was to be distant and to not be all that much involved in the children's upbringing. That was the mother's work. And fortunately for me, things started to change in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And I had the blessing to really participate in my daughter's life in a very full way. And it was such a great blessing. And I see that happening more and more, and that men are more and more able to participate fully in their children's lives, which is a wonderful way to awaken the heart energy. Highly recommended. This morning, the topic is the eternal now. It's a wonderful thing to even contemplate. The fact that at this particular moment, we are as much in the presence of God as we ever have been or we ever will be. There's only one thing lacking, and that is, Swami puts it in the reading here, is our self-definition, and that the transformation of our self-definition is all that's required to do that. It's a sign of that this shifting of ages, that can even be put out there at a church service, a Sunday morning service, that we are here to have immediate, full realization of God. That's what we're all about. That's why we came here this morning. It's a big shift away from the latest age we've been through, lower age, lower consciousness, much more matter bound. And in that age, that invitation was hidden. It was lost sight of, probably because most people were not capable of it, capable of that transformation of consciousness that it requires. In an age of matter bound awareness, it's very difficult to grasp anything as subtle as consciousness or energy. And so religion has to play to what people are capable of. And so it becomes a matter of focusing on physical objects, pictures, icons, ceremonies, outward ceremonies, anything that the people can relate to through their senses, and it will have some uplifting effect, no doubt. That's why it lasted all those thousands of years. But it can't take us to the level that we're invited to today, which is that step of realization of God's presence. This shift is something that, of course, is new. It's new on this planet. It's still, if we go from our tradition, it goes back about 150 years now, 160 years. That's changing of the focus, and we see this change. It's a wonderful time to be alive because those changes are so obvious. Not only the role of parenting that I was talking about earlier, where you start to see the balancing of the male and the female energies in parenting roles, but in all kinds of areas of life. We look at things like race prejudice and how much it's changed in the last 50, 60 years even. The whole idea of world brotherhood, that's another topic that Master offers us to concentrate on and to help manifest. It was not too long ago that world brotherhood was a joke. The people who fought the most were the closest neighbors. My personal heritage, my grandparents came over from Croatia, what's now Croatia. And if you've followed the last wars over there, one of the things Croatians do is they hate Serbs. They hate Serbians with every ounce of breath they can muster. I'm sure there's some reason for it from the past. There must have been a lot of atrocities. There were some, of course, the more recent ones. I remember one more shocking thing for me. I was right here at the Expanding Light about 10 years ago, and it was a Spiritual Renewal Week banquet, and a very holy time, and everybody's uplifted. And I sat down at this one table, and we started talking, and it was really a nice conversation with people. And this one lady asked about my background, and I said, well, I'm from what was then Yugoslavia. And she said, oh, yeah, so am I. She says, what part? And I said, Croatia. And she just immediately, this darkness came over her face, and she wouldn't speak to me the rest of the dinner because she was a Serb, and I was a Croat. It's so sad when you look back in history and you see how angry and how much misunderstanding there was between people who were neighbors. St. Francis in his lifetime, he went to war. He didn't go to war against Germany or Russia. He was in Italy, of course. He went to war against Perugia, which, as you can see from the hillside of Assisi, and that was the level of consciousness that people had. So tremendous, tremendous changes have been happening, and we have the benefit of that. But also, with the changes now comes the challenge that we can lift our sights higher. We can lift our sights to truly making full use of this human incarnation. Master says, among others, the only purpose of life is to find God. The only purpose is to seek God. He wrote an article called The Balanced Life, which I use a lot in school with the children. And one of the things he talks about is the main diseases that people have. And one of them he calls psychological insanity. And you read his definition of psychological insanity, and it's basically anything that if anyone puts anything before God in life, they're basically insane. Whether it's money or position or wealth or anything, it's craziness, and it's a waste of time. It's a waste of incredible opportunity. So we have that here. We have that opportunity to really take full advantage of it. How much we do is up to us. We have, it's a challenge. It's a challenge in our culture. We don't get a lot of reinforcement for thinking that God is the sole purpose of life. You look on the evening news, or you look on the culture that's around us, and you see why places like this are so important. World Brotherhood colonies, spiritual communities, ashrams, because outside it gets a little iffy, a little less clear. The monks, I'm one of them. We have a handful of monks here in the community, and so we had we're going to have a community wedding about a month ago now, a few weeks ago. And then we had the little discussion about, should we go to the wedding or not? And we thought, well, we want to support the couple. It's a really, it's a wonderful opportunity for them, but maybe not going there and watching people get all dressed up and look as beautiful as they possibly can might not be the best use of time for some people who are trying to be monks. So, so we thought, well, what did we do? Well, let's go. So I said, well, I was in town yesterday. This is on I think the wedding's on a Thursday. So I said, I was in town yesterday, and I was looking at the Del Oro Theater, and there was a movie on that looked like it might be worth seeing. It was called Letters to God. And I looked it up on the internet and thought, it's definitely possible. It might be fun to watch it. So we thought, okay, that's pretty safe. Let's go into Del. So we all got in the car and we drove into town, the Del Oro, and we walked up to the booth. And they usually change movies on Friday, right? Not on Thursday. But anyway, walked up there and no Letters to God. And I says, what happened? What happened? And the lady at the booth says, oh, well, we were going to show that, but we decided instead we make more money by showing Sex in the City. So we didn't have to think too long whether to go in or not. But it was funny because you just think, oh yeah, this culture it's got a long way to go. I mean, it's maybe moving in the right direction, but there's a lot of stragglers out there. And we see that. We see that there is movement toward world brotherhood. There's movement toward self-realization, but there's resistance. There's still a lot of souls on this planet that still aren't capable of experiencing consciousness. There's still a lot of souls on this planet that are their only reality is matter. Their only reality is what comes in through the senses. And so, how could they possibly relate to a calling to raise their consciousness? They can't. There's a lot of fear still. People still fear meditation. They fear yoga. Certain people in Nevada County still fear Ananda. It's natural. How else could they relate to it if they can't? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to sit there and. I happened to watch a little biography on the news the other day. It was about Yogi Berra and how Yogi Berra got his name. And Yogi Berra, for those of you who aren't baseball fans, was a very comical, lovable character back in the 50s and 60s, who had a name like Yogi Berra. And they said how he got his name was he was sitting there and he was watching a snake charmer or something in the late 40s. And I guess he was sitting there with his legs crossed, and people started teasing him, say, "Oh, you look like a yogi." And that was how he got his name. It stuck. That was my first introduction to yoga, actually. In the 1950s, I used to root for Yogi Berra. Never knew what his name meant. So anyway, we have this change happening, and it's a struggle. It will be a continuing struggle, but gradually this new consciousness will come more and more onto this plane. We all personally have that opportunity to serve this shifting of the ages, to bring in this awakened consciousness. So our job, though, of course, is not essentially an outer job, because again, that would be mistaking the outer reality for the inner reality. And this talk calls for an inner awakening. It says, the way to change the world is, if you're capable of it, if you have those sensitivities, is to change consciousness. Changing matter is secondary, and it can be a secondary result of changing consciousness. But devotees, it's a mistake to think that the best way you can serve the world is by changing matter, because you have a higher opportunity. And of course, the way that happens is by working inside and changing consciousness in ourselves. Not everybody will notice. People who don't have those sensitivities, they might notice that maybe you look a little happier. Maybe some of your relatives have told you that. Oh, at least you look happy. I don't understand what you're doing with your life, but at least you look happy. So maybe that's something people affect people that way. But other souls who are capable of appreciating consciousness shifts will be uplifted primarily by the consciousness that you live through yourself. This is in your personal relationships, marriages, your job. Nitai and I have the blessing to co-direct the schools here, and you do a lot of things, with the children. Many different, we take trips, we play volleyball, we do all kinds of stuff, but that's all secondary. The primary thing is if you're going to teach children. We have training courses. I'm going to go to Italy next month to do a training course in what we call Education for Life for new teachers. And I think about it, I think, oh yeah, I could talk for a long time about different things, but I said, really, it comes down to one thing. The way to work with children is to raise your consciousness. And the more you can raise your consciousness, the better it's going to work out. And because they will pick up on that. And yeah, the other ideas will come in, other things you can do with them, but again, that's secondary to that state of consciousness. So the question becomes, how do we shift that self-perception? We come in, and it's only natural in a way to think of ourselves as a body, because that's, of course, the thing that we're tripping over all the time from the time we're 2 years old. There it is. It's there every time you look in the mirror. It's the same face. It changes gradually, but it's the same basic face. And so it's pretty easy to think, I am that face. You think it'd be kind of nice for God to make it a little easier if we could change our face like we change clothes. We could at least put on something different once in a while to remind us that we're not that particular face. But that's the way it is. That's the way it's set up, and there's probably a greater wisdom that we'll appreciate someday. So anyway, we have this reality to deal with, and that's where this first self definition comes from. I am this body. Secondarily, I am this mind, although the mind shifts. It's easier to see you're not the mind. The mind changes quite a bit. Personality, another thing. It shifts gradually, especially as you practice these teachings. Your personality gradually uplifts. But there's more direct ways still, and that's what Master offers us. And then the reading today, there's Jesus talking about the harvest. Lift up your eyes to the harvest. In the Bhagavad Gita, telling you, yeah, it's really true. You lift up your eyes. That's one of the keys. It's one of the keys of yoga. It's one of the things that got lost, of course, in the darker ages. If you see saints, a picture of saints, sometimes you will see them lifting up their eyes up. But the thing that happened in church was, mea culpa. The eyes down, knees bent. Everything, all that stuff got lost, and it just made it a whole lot harder to grow spiritually, because you're not focusing on what really helps, the spiritual eye. You're focusing on beating your chest and pounding yourself, and I am a sinner, thinking about your sins. And how many places could you go to church this morning where that would be the main topic, about how you're a sinner, and you need to repent your sins, but the whole focus is on sin. And we tend to identify with that. We tend to identify with sin. What we want to do now is we want to say, no, we have another option. We have another way of approaching this. Lifting up the eyes is one part of it. all of yoga is another part of it. How to work harmoniously with the opportunity that we have in a physical form to actually grow. So concentrate on the spiritual eye. If you have the blessing of Kriya Yoga, practicing Kriya Yoga, why not work with those spinal currents rather than ignore them? All these things that yoga brings to us, again, it was been hidden for many centuries. It was only available to very, very few people on the planet because those were the only people who could make use of it. But now we all can make use of it. We can make use of these teachings. And we should start doing that. When we concentrate the spiritual eye, we have a chance of having an experience of inner communion. Again, how many people talk about inner communion at Sunday service? That's the core of what Ananda is all about. Use these techniques so that you'd have this sense, you know what the inner life is all about. You know, you have your own experience. It has nothing to do with belief. That's the other thing. Over the Dark Ages, belief got put in place instead of experience because people weren't capable of having experiences, so it might as well believe something. At least belief is better than nothing. Belief is better than a lot of other things you could do. Of course, there was always the question in my mind is, well, why should I believe this? I remember being raised as a Catholic and being told all these things I was supposed to believe, and then finding out that there were other people on the planet that were just as fervent about a whole different kind of set of beliefs, like the Muslims or the Jews or the Hindus. And the question came in my mind, well, how do you know which this belief is the right one? And there's no answer to that, of course. There's no real answer to it because it's arbitrary. It's arbitrary. You happen to be born in this particular place, you should believe these particular tenets of faith. So what we're offered now is not a belief system. You don't have to believe anything to get on this path. That's one thing that I just loved when I first wrote to get the teachings. This is a special weekend for me. I'm not sure exactly if this is the exact weekend, but somewhere around here is my 40th anniversary of coming to Ananda. And if anybody has been around long enough to remember the day that the temple burned down, first temple burned down, I came the next day. My job was to clean up the embers from the temple, from the burning temple. But it's to have a chance to work with these teachings all those years is incredible blessing. But what happens is that we can't look at it that way. We can't, again, if you look at it from a time perspective, you get caught in the sense world because time happens in the sense world. And if we let ourselves do that, well, I've done this for 40 years, or I've done X number of kriyas, or I have this particular role. After 40 years in a place, you get a lot of roles. You can let yourself get into a lot of definitions, and it's not a healthy thing to do, because again, going back to the topic today, the important thing is now. The important thing is, what do we do today? What do we do right now with these teachings? How do we identify ourselves? Are we going to identify with the outward role or not? And if we don't, well, what do we identify with? Well, it has to be that higher consciousness. It has to be that experience of inner peace, inner joy, inner love. And we have to commit ourselves. If today, if you don't have as much of that as you'd like, start now. Start today to increase it. Don't be satisfied with what you've done in the past. Don't be satisfied with whatever definitions you placed on yourself, because you don't have what you want. What you want is to be in that state all the time, as deeply as possible. How do you do that? Obviously, meditation. Meditation is the doorway. The spiritual eye is the place to focus. Kriya are the techniques to practice. We have to get to deepen those experiences more and more every single day, trying to go deeper, trying to find a way not to get stuck in habit patterns. You can do that just as much with your sadhana as you can do with anything else in life. As a school teacher, there's a temptation, I've taught this course before. I'll just do it the same way I did it last time. Those are the signs of becoming a psychological antique. It's a sign of becoming an automaton. We can't let anything get in the way. We can't let age get in the way. okay, I've been doing this, 40 years. I'm 50, 80, 90 years old. It doesn't make any difference. It's simply, Master tells a story of the woman he gave Kriya to, and I think she was 90 years old, and she just took it and, became realized in that lifetime. It's not a matter. We can't let those past habit patterns block us. So renew that. Renew the sadhana. Find ways to renew your sadhana. Find ways to renew your commitment to the teachings. One really important way is, how do you make that transition from meditation to external life? Because that's where the second part of the battle is. The first part of the battle is learning to calm your mind enough so you can get through all the layers of restlessness and to get into that perception, inner perception. But after you have that, that's not enough, because God calls us outwardly. Especially in this age, he calls us outwardly. Especially if you're connected with Ananda, he calls you outwardly, because there's an enormous amount to do. And all I have to do is look at Swami's example. There's just constantly new avenues to pursue. So there must be an important part of it. How do we come back out? How do we come out of our meditations? Well, Master talks about it. He says, don't just jump up from your meditation. He says, just do something, have an interim activity. Just, maybe picking up something, doing something quiet, like sweeping the floor, or, just taking a little walk, going out and appreciating the beauty of nature, whatever it is, but just have that transition period. So don't just jump right into your day's harness about, okay, I'm this set of definitions, that's who I was yesterday, and I'm going to be the same thing today. No, you want to learn to make that transition more gracefully, and try. What the purpose of it is to try to draw some of that inner consciousness of joy and that definition that I am that joy. That's who I am. I am that peace. That's who I am. This outer part of me is an expression of that, but that's the secondary reality. Another very, very important part, it has to do with silence and seclusion. If you read carefully, especially about Swami's experience with Master spent a lot of time in silence. And he asked his devotees to be in silence a lot of the time too. He very, very strongly encouraged it. Well, why? Because he didn't want to be bothered with all that noise, or didn't want to be bothered with questions? No, that wasn't it at all. The real reason was because that's the way you can silence. It's much easier to carry that consciousness into outward activity than if you're talking all the time. Talking is one of the hardest things to do and still maintain that inner focus. It's especially talking, in a conversation with somebody else who maybe isn't all that focused, and they're all upset about something, or and it's like, and you're trying to stay calm, and that's hard to do. That's a very difficult thing on the path. Something we need to learn, but it's definitely kind of more on the graduate level than on the beginning level. So practicing silence ourselves with the intention of how long, how deeply can I carry my inner awareness into my outer life. Seclusion. Seclusion is another huge thing. Master says seclusion is the price of greatness. Well, the greatness here is the ability to carry that inner consciousness into outward manifestation, into our outward lives, whether we're a student or a teacher or in charge of a market or some other enterprise. It's the same. It's exactly the same challenge. Can you carry that consciousness into what you do and not lose track? I know one of the other teachers has been focusing this spring on a activity that, what was his name? I can't remember his name right now. Anyway, he called it the minutes game. And the idea is every minute to stop and think, where's God? It's pretty hard to do once every minute. I got to sit in on a couple of classes, and there was a little timer, and people were grabbing their watch, say, time, and people would stop and, okay, just remember. I mean, it's actually a wonderful, powerful tool to do it. It's difficult, again, to bring in, especially depends on your job. But seclusion gives you that chance to be alone, to be quiet. And yes, you can do your meditations, but then you have time when you're not meditating, when you can just go for a walk, read a book or something. But the idea is to carry the consciousness into the outward activity, because it's a heck of a lot easier to do it in seclusion than it is in regular daily life. So it's an important part to put into your lives. I can tell you from experience that seclusions don't happen spontaneously, at least very, very rare. They happen because you plan to do them. You put it in your planner, in that outward world of yours, and say, I'm going to take a seclusion June 15th to June 20th or something like that. And then you start telling people, no, I'm booked. Nothing's happening those 5 days. And that's the only way they happen. Otherwise, things just creep in, and all of a sudden, a 5-day seclusion turns into a 1-day seclusion, and then, well, maybe a morning. And, oh, well, all right, well, next time. So just take up the challenge. Take up that challenge to say, starting today, I want to live more fully that experience of my inner reality. I'm not my outer roles. I'm not my mistakes from the past. This is something, again, that Swami and Master help us understand. It's just as bad. I mean, what is it? What is it that causes those things? Bhagavad Gita says it all starts with dwelling. And there's a term that at least the translation Master used. It says, when we dwell on sense objects, it creates attachment. It's a really interesting thing to think of. What does dwelling mean? Dwelling, I think, in this sense means putting all of your attention on it, forgetting everything else in life and just thinking about this one thing. So maybe it's a car. Okay. So if dwelling on the car, if you really think about the new 2010 model of whatever car you like, and you just let yourself go, you're going to create an attachment. Sooner or later, that car is going to become important to you, and you're going to start to think about it. I wonder how I could finance that. And then, so he says, from attachment, though, from dwelling on an object creates attachment. Attachment creates desire. So it kind of turns into a desire. Now you have a desire for the car. You may or may not get the car, which usually results in upset, anger. And then anger, of course, blots out everything else. And now you're completely trapped. So when we have these things outwardly, whatever it is that holds our mind to them is something we want to get away from. So desire obviously comes from thinking about sense objects. But another thing that is regret. Regret for the past is just as bad as desire, because what are we doing? We're reminding ourselves of the identity we're trying to escape from. We're saying, oh, I made a mistake. Huge change from the past. It's, I am a sinner. I'm a sinner. I've got to remember these sins, and I've got to worship them. But the Master says, everything in the past is gone. Nothing you've done, no matter what it is, needs to have any effect on your future. Let it go. Think about that, and put all that attention that you might have put into regret or sorrow, put it on remembering God. Put it on remembering, redefining yourself as that inner light, that inner joy. And take all that energy, don't waste it on past stuff. Emphasize the positive. And then our journey can be very, very short, can be a moment. It's a wonderful part of these teachings to remember that no matter what you're into, you just might have blown it. I just said the wrong thing to some kid, and I just, not being sensitive or what it is. It's over. Right now, I can change. I haven't meditated I forgot to meditate. I didn't energize. Forget it. I can energize right now. I could sit down and do a few Curies right now. It's always available. And it will continue to be available. It's not just available this morning. It will continue to be available to you every moment of the rest of your life. God bless you.
'Twas a day sanctified by God. There he showed me the truths of heaven, truths which all seeking him should know. How the soul made to live in freedom can reclaim